I am delighted to be with you today. I wish it were not virtual, but real. I have been spending my week working with the Congress, working with the American public, working with U.S. think tanks in support of Ukraine here in Washington. I hope you can feel the enormous bipartisan support for all that you are engaged in there. To bring a more democratic, more prosperous, more stable, and more peaceful future for your country. I wanted to say first and foremost that we are enormously impressed with the energy, the commitment, the unity that individuals and politicians across the political spectrum have brought to this moment of intense transition, opportunity, and challenge for Ukraine. I want to start by congratulating the Rada on passing the public procurement law today. This is the kind of legislation that says to the Ukrainian people and says to the world that the days of a corrupt Ukraine that steals from its people are over. That one of the #1 requests of the Maidan, to live in a clean country where government serves the people and is of the people, rather than stealing from the people, is in their future. And it's just one of the many courageous steps that the transitional government, the Rada, and civil society have supported and taken over this incredible last 6-week period. And as hard as it is every day, there in Kyiv, there in Ukraine, you have to take pride and you have to pause and reflect in how far you have come. Piece of legislation after legislation supporting the kind of economic reform that will open the country to real investment, that will ensure that the budget of the nation serves the people rather than a corrupt few, that opens the system for the kind of transparency that people demand, and most importantly, that has opened the opportunity for Ukraine to benefit from IMF support at the level of $18 billion, which will stabilize the country and help give you your sovereignty back, your opportunity back to bring prosperity across the country. And then equally importantly, the steps you have taken to give your people true democratic choice in presidential elections on May 25th. More than 20 candidates in the race now, representing every color of the Ukrainian political spectrum. Now, what is important is to maintain the openness, the stability, the environment for a true competition and true choice for every Ukrainian voter to make their wishes for the future known. The best antidote to aggression, to pressure, to efforts to steal your sovereignty is for every Ukrainian to stand up and say, we will make our choice for the future. We will make it at the ballot box. We will make it by supporting our politicians who want real change, who want to live in a clean, democratic country that can live in prosperity with Europe and with Russia and with countries around the world at the same time. I hope you feel that the United States is 100% behind the efforts that you are making to resist pressure, to resist aggression, to make Ukraine a model of a peaceful, democratic, clean country. That is the best antidote to what is happening on your borders, to the situation in Crimea, so that even Crimeans will question in a few years' time the choice that they made. So what is the United States doing to help? First, as you know, following the IMF agreement, we have had bipartisan support in the Congress to provide Ukraine with a $1 billion loan guarantee to support the IMF program. This money will primarily go in consultation with the Ukrainian government to support implementation of the reforms that you are making, but primarily to cushion the blow, the increase in energy prices and those kinds of things, cushion the poor Ukrainians from the impact. We also are providing more than $170 million over the next year to support other programs of the Ukrainian government and people, including to help Ukraine reform its public procurement sector along the lines of the bill that passed today in the Rada, to ensure that every citizen knows how the government's money, how their tax money is spent, to reform the energy sector, to ensure that you have diversity of options, that you're no longer held by the neck by one supplier. We've talked in the US-Ukrainian conversation for more than 20 years that energy security is Ukraine's sovereignty, is Ukraine's independence. You've taken bold steps legislatively in the last couple of weeks to make that clear. Now they need to be implemented, and now the Ukrainian people need to understand that these measures, even if they come with some short-term economic pain, are the path to freedom, independence, and sovereignty for Ukraine, and we will support that. We're also supporting the important changes you're making in the agriculture sector to ensure that public procurement in agriculture and purchases are clean and transparent, and similarly in the implementation of this broad anti-corruption program that the government and the Rada are putting in place. We will, of course, provide generous support for free, fair elections and have an unprecedented number of American monitors present throughout Ukraine, both through the OSCE and through National Democratic Institute and International Republican Institute. We'll provide more than $11.5 million to support administration of the elections, voter education, and an independent media. We are also working with your government, as you know, to ensure that there is a diplomatic path forward if Russia chooses to take it. And as you know, we are talking about consultations next week among Foreign Minister Deshitsa, the EU's High Representative Cathy Ashton, Foreign Minister Lavrov, and Secretary Kerry. And the goal here is to ensure that Ukraine has the support of the United States and the EU in its direct dialogue with Russia to try to de-escalate the security situation, to deal with the thugs and the irregulars and the weapons coming across the border, to deal with the aggressive abuse of your sovereignty by intelligence agents, by other provocateurs, to make the case to the Russian Federation that many of the social and political issues that they have raised over the last months are being addressed in Ukraine by Ukrainians, that constitutional reform must be Ukrainian-owned, Ukrainian-led, that in fact the commission that you've put in place is broad-based, that it is reaching out to the regions, but it must be Ukrainians who decide what the structure of your state looks like, not any outside country. And that it is unacceptable for Russia to make demands for federalization that would take Ukraine to the brink of risking dissolution, and that far outstrip anything that Moscow would be willing to offer its own regions. Rather, there must be a united Ukrainian conversation about appropriate decentralization that gives elected authority back to the regions, that gives budgeting authority back to the regions, that creates a new compact, a new dialogue between the regions and Kyiv. This is healthy. Your process is ongoing. We support it. Outside countries, whether it's the United States, whether it's the EU, whether it's Russia, can offer our advice, but we will stand with you as you protect this process and ensure that it is Ukrainian. Similarly, if Russia has concerns about the security situation inside Ukraine, it can play a positive role in demobilization. It can offer funding and support for the weapons buyback program that the government has proposed. It can stand up today in Moscow and call for a settlement of the building standoffs in Luhansk and Donetsk peacefully and call for irregulars to put down their weapons. So just to underscore, we will go into these conversations in quadrilateral format next week, prepared to support the sovereignty, the independence of Ukraine, its right to make its own choices, and push Russia to demonstrate by its actions and its deeds that it is prepared to be a good neighbor. Why don't I pause there and see if there are questions that I can answer from the group?
Very good. Anyone wants to ask a question? Yes, please.
Ms. Nuland, my name is Vasyl Mirosnochenko. I represent CFC Consulting and Ukraine Crisis Media Center. In the recent article, Economist has compared Vladimir Putin to the Cupid who ignited the relationship between the US and the EU, the transatlantic partnership. So my question is about how is that relationship going on, and if you as a couple, US and the EU, intend to implement and escalate the level of comprehensive economic, financial, immigration, and other sanctions on Russia. Thank you.
Well, as you know, in the first term of the Obama administration, we put a huge amount of effort into trying to reset the relationship with Russia. It did pay some benefits, primarily in the global sphere, in terms of closer US-Russian cooperation to address issues like the Iran nuclear program, working more closely together on Syria, working the New START treaty, which reduced nuclear weapons on both sides, obviously of benefit to everyone, working more closely on Afghanistan. But throughout that period, we were also very frank from the Washington's perspective about our deep concerns about the rollback of democratic institutions inside Russia itself and our concerns about the human rights situation. Obviously, Russia's invasion of Crimea has completely changed our bilateral relationship. We have suspended virtually all of our economic and military cooperation. We have downgraded a lot of our multilateral engagement, and almost the entire dialogue that we are having with Russia today is about de-escalation in Ukraine. We have instituted, as you know, 2 rounds of sanctions against Russian individuals and entities who we consider to have played a role or have been supporting players in a policy of abuse of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We are looking at more sanctions now in response to continuing pressure and aggression. But at the same time, as I said, we are leaving the door open for diplomacy and de-escalation if Russia chooses to walk through it. So the choice is Russia's, and our relationship will reflect the choice that they make.